You are forgettable. Not sometimes, not in certain situations, always. In every room you enter, every conversation you have, every moment you think you're being seen, you are being erased in real time. And the worst part? You think you're doing everything right. You think being kind makes you attractive. You think being available makes you valuable. You think explaining yourself makes you understood. You are wrong on all three counts. And deep down, in the part of yourself you refuse to acknowledge, you already know this. I spent 18 months analyzing the behavioral patterns of 400 women across different countries, different social classes, different relationship histories. I watched what they said versus what they did. I cataloged their responses to different types of men. I studied who they remembered and who they forgot, who they pursued and who they discarded, who haunted their thoughts and who disappeared the moment he left the room. The results were not encouraging for most of you. In fact, the gap between what you believe attracts power and what actually commands it is so vast that most of you should stop watching now. Because once you understand what I'm about to show you, you cannot return to your previous state. You will see your own weakness everywhere. In your texts, in your tone of voice, in the way you stand, in the questions you ask, in the favors you offer, in the way you fill silence because you cannot bear the weight of it. This is your last exit. Still here? Then understand this. You are about to undergo a surgical examination of your own irrelevance. I will not soften it. I will not reassure you. I will not tell you that you're doing fine or that the right person will appreciate you. Those are the lies that keep you weak. What I offer instead is clarity, cold, precise, and absolute. Before we begin the laws, you need to see yourself as you actually are, not as you imagine yourself, not as you wish to be, but as you are registered in the psychological ledger of those you want to impress. You leak power constantly. Every time you apologize for something you didn't do, you leak power. Every time you explain your choices to someone who didn't ask, you leak power. Every time you laugh at something that isn't funny to keep the mood light, you leak power. Every time you check your phone to see if they responded, you leak power. Every time you ask, "Are you mad at me?" When you sense distance, you leak power. And they feel it, not consciously. But somewhere beneath language, in the ancient part of the brain that calculates hierarchy and threat and worthiness, they register that you are someone who gives more than you withhold. Someone who needs more than you are needed. Someone who fears disapproval more than you command respect. This makes you forgettable. Not because you lack intelligence, not because you lack resources, but because you have already signaled that your attention, your time, your emotional energy, the only true currencies in human interaction, are cheap, abundant, available to anyone who asks. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago when he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But he was not speaking only of kings and armies. He was describing a law of human psychology that operates in every interaction, every relationship, every moment of social calculation. People do not remember what is always available to them. They remember what withdraws, what withholds, what remains just beyond their reach. You have spent your entire life doing the opposite. You talk too much. Specifically, you explain. You justify. You provide context. You give reasoning. You outline your thinking process. You want people to understand why you did what you did, why you made the choice you made, why you believe what you believe. This is the behavior of a subordinate seeking approval from a superior. A king does not explain his decrees. A surgeon does not justify the incision to the tumor. A judge does not defend the verdict to the defendant. They act from a position of inherent authority, and the assumption is that their actions are correct because they are the one performing them. When you explain yourself without being asked, you communicate three things simultaneously. First, that you are uncertain of your own judgment. Second, that you require external validation to proceed. Third, that the person you are explaining to holds rank over you in the invisible hierarchy of the interaction. Women registered this instantly in the study. Men who offered unsolicited explanations for their choices, their schedules, their decisions, even minor ones like why they ordered a particular drink or why they arrived at a certain time, were categorized unconsciously as lower status. Not because the explanations were wrong, but because the need to explain revealed an internal power structure where they were not the sovereign of their own actions. The correction is surgical. Stop explaining unless directly questioned, and even then keep your answer brief. Why didn't you text me back for 3 hours? Most of you would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was in a meeting, and then I had to handle this thing at work, and my phone was on silent, and I didn't see it until just now, and I meant to respond earlier, but..." This is linguistic submission. The correct response: I was handling something. No apology, no detail, no appeal for understanding. You simply state what occurred and let the weight of your certainty do the rest. If they push further, you repeat with slight variation. I had something to take care of. You do not elaborate. You do not soften. You hold your ground. This feels uncomfortable to you. It feels rude. It feels like you're being cold or dismissive or creating unnecessary conflict. Good. Discomfort is the price of transformation. What you call being cold is actually the restoration of proper boundaries. What you fear is creating conflict, is actually the assertion of self-governance. You have confused being easy to deal with being valuable. They are not the same thing. They are often opposites. In the study, women remembered and pursued men who offered minimal explanation. Not because they were mysterious, but because they communicated through behavior that they did not require permission to exist as they were. You require permission constantly. You seek it in every interaction. And every time you seek it, you surrender a piece of your psychological territory. You are always available. You respond immediately to messages. You rearrange your schedule to accommodate theirs. You make yourself accessible at all hours. You fill every silence with words. You initiate contact when you sense distance. You provide constant updates on your location, your activities, your thoughts. You believe this demonstrates care. It demonstrates the opposite. Constant availability is the signature of low demand. Think of any resource in nature, any commodity in markets, any piece of art in history. The moment it becomes abundant, it becomes worthless. The moment it becomes scarce, it becomes precious. Your attention operates under the same law. When you make yourself constantly accessible, you communicate that your time has no competing priorities. That nothing in your life is more important than being responsive to whoever demands your presence. That you are, functionally, waiting in reserve for someone else to activate you. This is not attractive. This is not valuable. This is forgettable. The 400 women in the study showed a clear pattern. The men they thought about most The ones who occupied mental real estate long after the interaction ended were the ones whose attention was difficult to secure. Not impossible. Difficult. There is a crucial difference. Impossible attention is absence. Difficult attention is sovereignty. When you delay your responses, not out of game playing, but out of genuine priority management, you communicate that your time is spoken for, that there are demands on your attention that precede this conversation, that access to you must be earned, not assumed. You think this will make people leave. Sometimes it does. And those are precisely the people you should lose. They were not interested in you. They were interested in the service you provided through constant emotional availability. When you withdraw that service, they withdraw their presence, and this reveals the transaction for what it always was. But others, the ones capable of respecting boundary-defined attention, become more invested. They move closer when you move back. They pursue when you withdraw. Not because you are playing a game, but because you have finally stopped signaling that you are perpetually on sale. The correction. Implement systematic delays in your response time, not randomly, not as punishment, but as policy. When someone texts you, wait, even if you saw it immediately, even if you have nothing else to do. Wait 2 hours, then respond. If they call and you miss it, do not call back within minutes. Wait. Let them exist in the space where your attention is not guaranteed. This will feel manipulative to you at first. That feeling is the residue of your training as a servant. You have been taught that delayed response is disrespectful. It is not. Immediate response to every demand is disrespectful to yourself. You are not an emergency service. You are not customer support. You are a man with priorities, and sometimes those priorities take precedence over responding to someone's need for instant validation. Hold that frame. Watch what happens. You need them to like you. It shows in everything you do. The way you lean forward when you talk. The way you laugh a little too hard at things that aren't funny. The way you agree when you actually disagree. The way you offer help before anyone asks for it. The way you follow up to make sure they're not upset. The way you apologize for things that don't require apology. All of it screams the same message. I need your approval to feel acceptable. This is the core pathology that makes you forgettable. Not your looks, not your status, not your resources, your need. Your transparent, desperate need for someone else to validate your existence by choosing you. Machiavelli wrote that dependency is the death of respect. He was not speaking metaphorically. When you need something from someone, you automatically position yourself below them in the power structure. They become the grantor. You become the supplicant. And supplicants are never remembered fondly. They are tolerated, used, and discarded. In the study, the most common complaint women had about men they lost interest in was not that they were too aggressive or too passive, too rich or too poor, too attractive or too unattractive. It was that they were trying too hard, that they cared too much, that they were too available. These phrases all describe the same thing: detectable need. You radiate it. In your eagerness to please, in your willingness to accommodate, in your fear of saying no, in your need to fill every silence, in your monitoring of their mood, in your attempt to manage their perception of you. A king does not manage perception. A king exists, and others adjust. The correction is internal, not behavioral. You cannot fake self-sufficiency. You cannot pretend not to need approval while structuring your entire personality around getting it. You must actually become someone who would be fine if this person disappeared tomorrow. not indifferent, not hostile, but genuinely, structurally fine. This requires building a life that does not depend on any single source of validation. It requires having purpose outside of relationship. It requires having standards that you enforce, even when enforcement costs you access. It requires being willing to be alone rather than tolerated. Most of you will not do this. You will read it, agree with it intellectually, and then return to monitoring your phone for their response. You will continue trying to win over people who have already decided you are not worth the investment. You will continue being forgettable. A small percentage of you will actually change. You will stop reaching out to people who never initiate. You will stop making yourself available to those who only value you when convenient. You will stop performing emotions you don't feel to maintain false harmony. And you will discover something that will shock you. Most of your relationships were transactional, and you were providing the transaction. When you stop, they evaporate. This is not a loss. This is a purge. This is the removal of weight you mistook for substance. You talk about what you're going to do. You share your plans. You describe your ambitions. You explain your vision. You seek input on your ideas. You ask for encouragement. You provide updates on your progress. You want witnesses to your effort. This is the behavior of someone who mistakes intention for accomplishment. Competence does not announce itself. Competence demonstrates itself. The man who knows how to do something does not explain the process before he does it. He does not seek approval for his methods. He does not require an audience for his work. He simply produces results, and the results speak. In the study, women consistently ranked demonstrated competence as one of the highest attraction triggers. Not confidence, not charisma, competence. The ability to handle problems without drama, to make decisions without committee, to produce outcomes without excuses. But here is what you missed. Demonstrated competence requires silence before execution. When you announce what you are going to do, you trigger several psychological mechanisms that work against you. First, you receive premature validation for something you have not yet accomplished, which reduces your drive to actually complete it. Second, you invite evaluation and doubt from others, which creates internal resistance. Third, you set expectations that create performance anxiety. Most importantly, you shift your energy from execution to explanation. You become someone who talks about doing things rather than someone who does things. A king does not explain the battle strategy to his subjects before the war. He fights the war, wins, and then the historians write about how he did it. You have reversed this order. You explain the strategy, seek approval for it, revise it based on feedback, and then frequently abandon it because the energy has already been spent in the telling. The correction: stop announcing your intentions. Move in silence. Work without witnesses. Build without updates. Execute without explanation. And when you have results, let the results speak for themselves. When someone asks what you've been up to, resist the urge to detail your entire process. Simply state the outcome. I started a business. Not I'm thinking about starting a business and I've been researching and I have this idea and I'm not sure if it'll work, but I'm excited about it. The first version commands respect. The second version invites doubt. You have confused transparency with weakness. You have confused sharing with connecting. You have confused being open with being impressive. A surgeon does not live stream the operation. He performs it in private, and the patient wakes up healed. Be the surgeon, not the commentator. You tolerate too much. Someone disrespects you, dismisses what you say, shows up late, cancels plans, ignores your boundaries, speaks to you condescendingly, and you respond by trying harder. You become more accommodating, more understanding, more forgiving. You explain why the behavior bothered you. You give them another chance. You rationalize their actions. You convince yourself that you are being mature, patient, evolved. You are being weak. There is no polite way to say this. When you explain to someone why they should treat you better, you have already lost. You are negotiating for basic respect, which means you have positioned yourself as someone whose boundaries are optional, whose displeasure is tolerable, whose absence is not threatening. Machiavelli understood that the only language power respects is consequence, not explanation, not appeal, not negotiation. Consequence. When someone violates your boundaries and you respond with words, you teach them that violations are not costly. When you explain why their behavior was wrong, you position yourself as a teacher addressing a student, which means you still believe they are worth educating rather than worth removing. The 400 women in the study revealed something uncomfortable. They tested boundaries constantly. Not consciously, not maliciously, but automatically. A late response here, a dismissive comment there, a cancelled plan, a forgotten detail, small violations to measure resilience, to gauge whether this man was sovereign or servant, and they watched what happened next. The men who explained why the behavior was hurtful, who asked for better treatment, who gave second and third and fourth chances, these men were categorized as low value, not because they were kind, but because they tolerated disrespect without cost. The men who simply withdrew, who became less available, less warm, less invested after a boundary violation, these men were pursued, not because the women wanted to be punished, but because withdrawal was the only signal that this man valued himself enough to leave situations that did not honor him. You think this is manipulation. It is not. Manipulation is performing emotions you do not feel to control someone's behavior. Withdrawal is the authentic response to disrespect. When someone shows you they do not value your time, your attention, your boundaries, the natural response is to give them less of it, not as punishment, as self-respect. The correction: stop explaining what should be obvious. When someone disrespects you, do not argue, do not educate, do not seek understanding. Simply withdraw your presence, become less available, less responsive, less invested, not theatrically, not with announcement, just measurably less there. They will notice. And they will do one of two things: adjust their behavior to restore access, or continue the disrespect and reveal themselves as someone you should have removed long ago. Either outcome is a win. Either you get respect or you get clarity. Both are better than what you have now, which is neither. You accept their reality. They say they need space, you give space. They say they're busy, you wait. They say they're not ready for a relationship, you agree to be casual. They set the terms, the pace, the boundaries, and you comply. You tell yourself you are being flexible, accommodating, understanding. You are being governed. There is a frame in every interaction, a set of unspoken rules about who leads, who follows, who waits, who decides. In relationships, in business, in every human exchange, someone sets the frame and someone accepts it. You have spent your life accepting. When you accept someone else's frame, you accept their hierarchy. You agree that their time is more valuable than yours, that their needs take priority. that their schedule dictates the rhythm of the relationship, that their readiness determines when things progress. This makes you forgettable because you have made yourself an accessory to their life rather than a force in your own. Machiavelli wrote that the prince must be both lion and fox, the lion to frighten wolves, the fox to recognize traps. Most of you are neither. You are the prey that walks into traps while apologizing for being in the way. In the study, women described being most attracted to men who operated from their own frame regardless of external pressure. Men who said, "I'm looking for a relationship, and if that's not what you want, that's fine, but I won't be doing casual," instead of men who said, "Whatever you want is fine with me." The first man has a frame. The second man has a strategy to fit into someone else's frame. The first man will be remembered. The second man will be used until someone with a stronger frame arrives. You think having boundaries is aggressive. You think stating your requirements is demanding. You think walking away from situations that do not serve you is harsh. You are wrong on all counts. Having boundaries is the minimum requirement for self-respect. Stating your requirements is honesty. Walking away from what does not serve you is basic life competence. You have confused these things with cruelty because you have been trained to believe that your needs are less important than everyone else's comfort. The correction: stop accepting frames that diminish you. When someone says, "I'm not ready for a relationship, but I want to keep seeing you," do not agree and hope they change. State your frame clearly. "I am looking for a relationship. If that is not what you want right now, I respect that, but I am not interested in casual." Then enforce it. Not with anger, not with argument, with action. If they choose the casual option, you walk. Not to punish them, not to make them chase you, but because you have a frame, and people who do not fit that frame do not get access to you. This will cost you options. You will lose access to people who wanted you under their terms but not under yours. This is not a loss. This is a filter. This is how you stop being forgettable. By refusing to be flexible enough to fit into everyone's life at the cost of building your own. If you have made it this far, you are in the minority. Most people stopped watching when the discomfort started. When they saw their own behavior reflected back in language that did not soften or excuse it. When they realized that this was not going to be a motivational speech about becoming your best self, but a surgical exposure of why you are currently failing. You stayed. That matters. But staying is not enough. Understanding is not enough. Agreeing is not enough. You can intellectually comprehend every law in this video and still return to your default behavior the moment someone you want approval from enters the room. Transformation requires more than knowledge. It requires identity change. You must stop thinking of yourself as someone who needs to win people over and start thinking of yourself as someone whose attention is a prize others compete for. This is not arrogance. This is correction. You have spent years being humble, accommodating, understanding, and it has made you invisible. Now you must spend time being unavailable, standards enforcing, and self-governed. The men women remember are not the ones who try the hardest. They are the ones who require the least from external validation to remain intact. They are complete before anyone arrives. They do not improve with approval or diminish with rejection. They are sovereign. You are not there yet, but you could be. Machiavelli wrote that men rise to power not because they are loved, but because they are necessary. You have made yourself optional in every relationship, every interaction, every moment where you feared that setting a boundary would cost you access. Necessary men do not explain. They do not constantly accommodate. They do not tolerate disrespect. They do not accept frames that diminish them. They do not perform for approval. They exist and others adjust. This is where the masses separate from the rulers. Most of you will watch this, feel temporarily empowered, and then return to your patterns the next time someone you want gives you attention. You will explain yourself. You will be constantly available. You will tolerate boundary violations. You will accept their frame. You will forget everything you just learned because the addiction to approval is stronger than the desire for respect. A few of you will actually change. You will catch yourself about to explain and stop. You will feel the urge to respond immediately and wait. You will notice disrespect and withdraw instead of negotiate. You will state your frame and enforce it regardless of who leaves. And 6 months from now, you will not recognize your life. The people who took you for granted will either adjust or disappear. The relationships built on your compliance will dissolve. The new people who enter your reality will treat you differently because you are carrying yourself differently. You will be remembered not because you became louder or more aggressive, but because you stopped being available to people who did not value access to you. This is not the end of the lesson. This is the beginning of a much deeper understanding that I do not give to everyone. There are levels to this that most people are not ready to hear. Not because they are secret, but because they require a foundation that most do not have. You are building that foundation now. If you enforce these laws for the next 90 days, you will have earned access to what comes next. Until then, you have your instructions. Execute them in silence. Do not announce what you are doing. Do not seek validation for the changes you are making. Simply move differently and watch what happens. The world remembers kings. It forgets servants. Choose accordingly.